I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Poured Over. And yes, the set looks a little different. We are not live in a store. We are not live in the studio over Zoom. I get to hang out on the 5th floor of our illustrious home office with Kiran Desai, who is one of my favorite humans on the planet, and also someone I've known for a really long time, since 1998, when Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard was first published. It's been a minute. But more importantly, we're here because the loneliness of Sonny and Sonia is out. And you, and I was not expecting this from you, and I've known your work for more than a minute, and I've known you for more than a minute, but this book is almost 700 pages, my friend.
I know, my friend, Miwa.
Almost 700 pages.
You know, can I just say?
Yes.
When you said that you've known me for a minute, I remember you were my first publicist. Remember that?
I do. We had paper plane tickets. Paper plane tickets. I ran up to your apartment on the very, very far Upper West Side. You were living by Columbia at that point.
127th Street.
Here are plane tickets. You need them. Yes. You actually had to show paper plane tickets to get on the plane.
I remember those days.
So long ago. But this epic love story. I am madly, madly in love with Sonny and Sonia and their extended families. But I'm really in love with what you did with this book, because you always said you were never going to write a love story, but it was sort of itching you to do that. You did say that at some point. You were like, why would I do that? Why would I do that?
Yeah, because I think as a, if you see yourself as a literary writer, you somehow think you don't want to go there.
Right.
But perhaps writing my last book, which was really political, perhaps that gave me some confidence to go to this other subject that actually seemed harder. It seems easier to write a big political book than to go to those very quiet spaces where people are very vulnerable. And somehow I think as an author, you also put yourself, it makes you vulnerable too, to go to those the most intimate sphere you can, and it feels like the biggest challenge. It feels like the biggest challenge to a writer. So I probably, who knows what I was thinking? I was probably too scared to go there. And then realized that I wanted to write. There's always politics in my work.
Yep.
But to really see politics from how it gets to that very intimate space between two people, between Sonny and Sonia, between their parents, those things.
One of the things I think about when I'm reading you too is that, we live in this global universe, right? The world has gotten smaller, every year, right? The world has gotten smaller, and yet our loneliness, our collective loneliness has grown exponentially, right? Here we are living online in ways that we did not previously, or having access to culture from around the world. And I'm not even talking about food, right? I'm talking about literature and movies and art and, well, in some cases politics too. And yet human loneliness seems to be increasing rapidly. And I love this idea that runs through the loneliness of Sonny and Sonia, where as much as we are looking for connection, you've written a diaspora novel where as much as we're looking for connection, there's still that loneliness is always there, sort of just an arm's length away.
Yeah, it's so strange that the planet is getting busier and we are much more mixed up than ever before. The world is getting, in many ways, it's getting smaller, but the unknowingness is getting bigger.
Right.
We are mixed up and we don't know each other. And I feel like there's an enormous amount of migration going on. But even for someone who's not leaving their home, somebody from across the planet is moving in next door.
Right.
And I feel like there's an enormous anxiety everywhere in the world about that happening. But yes, in a way, I thought that, I was choosing in this book to look at loneliness, to see loneliness as, ubiquitous as water. There are a lot of water images in this book.
Yeah.
As if it's just changing form and morphing form. and I was following all the different forms it could take from shame and from some sort of painful loneliness, but also loneliness as a kind of sustenance.
Mm-hmm. I think loneliness is it fuels art, right? Like we've got
Yes.
a young man who is a journalist, but obviously has some designs beyond that. He wants to be a very specific kind of long form, sort of more classical kind of, not necessarily the beat deadline guy kind of thing, doing 300 words because you have 5 minutes to tell this story. We've got a young woman who's a novelist. And then painters pop up in a couple of different forms. So you are talking about art and how our loneliness feeds our art in many ways. And I want to spend some time on that because, there is this idea that loneliness is the thing that will take you out at the knees and then there is no more. And yet you've given us this terrain where it's actually fueling a very primary source of connection, right? Storytelling is... possibly the first human thing we ever did.
Yes. Yeah. I'm suddenly remembering, all of a sudden, I'm just remembering Edna O'Brien saying, a writer has to be lonely.
I did not know she'd said that, but okay.
Yeah. But with Sunny and Sonia and art and writing and painting, let's just talk about Sunny a little bit. He's going through various kinds of loneliness in that he's an immigrant in the process of creating a kind of unknowable creature out of himself.
Right.
And there's a loneliness involved in that, in sort of displacing yourself very deliberately. And he's also realizes how the news is also changes, also transforms as it travels from country to country. And as a journalist, that's very unsettling to think that it's a different story on the other side of the planet. And of course, Sonia is, well, she's displaced in so many different ways as well. And I think what they're both thinking about is who gets to tell the story and who is in whose purview, who is in whose gaze. So they have, Sunny wants to be a journalist, Sonia wants to be a writer, but somehow they also feel trapped by somebody else's gaze, and they're experiencing these, these power divides that are just part of our world.
Right. The gaze, too. The gaze can belong to family. I will say Sunny's mom is quite a character. I'm quite fond of Sunny's mom. She is a handful. But this idea, too, right? You have this line where you're like, well, we care too much. I'm paraphrasing you, but that there's a generation that cares too much about what mom and dad think and what their aunties and uncles think and what their grandparents think. Like, they will never be truly cool because they keep thinking about home and how they're perceived. And respectability, right, is a thing. Like, Sunny's mother is very excited that he's gone to America and he's going to be a journalist and he will do all of these things, and the reality of his life is a little messier than mama knows.
And the mother just thinks he's there to succeed, and in fact he doesn't really want to succeed.
Right.
He tells her, I never came to this country to be rich, which is a shocking thing for his mother to hear. And it's also why he leaves India in a way, because he's very privileged in India.
Right.
And he somehow feels that he will never be a proper journalist if he lives in that world. But yes, that's, I think, the artistic challenge that they both have, is that they have to overcome this obstacle of being captured by someone else's gaze, of feeling that way, and trying to find a way to tell a true story where while they feel they belong in no one place, they can't be certain of their landscape. And perhaps it's loneliness that allows them to finally break through that.
Lonely does put Sonia in an orbit with a character that I really wanted to punt into the sun. Undeniably a talented painter, certainly, but one of those older men where you're like, oh yeah, no good will come of this.
Yes.
And not in a stereotypical caricature kind of... I was hopeful at first. I was like, please don't be that guy. Oh, man.
Yes.
Oh, man, that guy, Elan, I really wanted to punt him into the sun. I really did. He made me so mad, but yet without that experience, Sonia would not be the Sonia that I love.
Yes.
Right? So I kind of have to go along with this guy, but man.
I know. You always hope that those people don't exist, but they exist.
Oh, he totally does. He totally does. How did he come about?
You know, one thing I was thinking about was fame and how it creates monsters out of people.
Right.
And that's something I think in our world we see
All
all
the
over the place.
All the time.
The desire for fame, the achievement of fame. And fame also, by the way, is a lonely thing, you know. These are people who just become their image.
Right.
More than anything else. I think one of the characters said they're being bartered and sold so much that there's nothing exists except for the desire for fame and fame itself.
Right.
And that is some part of the loneliness of our world. Really, it's one of the lonelinesses I was trying to write about is how in our planet, when we are sort of where people who have belonged for centuries in one place, one community, one religion, one landscape, are now, that's all being undone.
Right.
And that you are not known unless you're famous, which is a very, very frightening thought. Because, of course, fame is nothing, it's cobwebs. And yet you're not known in any one landscape, which is frightening, which is, I think, you know, it's not exactly true of me, but it's certainly something of my experience because, and true, I mean, I'm tracing it back to my grandparents' time. They left, on my father's side, they left Gujarat for a caste, community, religion.
Right.
They gave up all those things in exchange for this idea of a secular country. Moved out of that way of thinking, out of that landscape, drastically transformed. And you know, I could say the same on my mother's side, but it's, you know, it's also something that happened to me. I'm not known anymore by people who've known my parents and my grandparents.
Right.
So perhaps that was what I was somewhat thinking about Elan, but also the redundancy of that, you know, of that story of the older artist, monster artist, the younger woman artist. And Sonia falls into it because, of course, he's charismatic and represents this huge, big, globalized world, this exciting, adventurous world. At the same time, it becomes the obstacle for her, as I said, who is captured by whose gaze, who is in whose purview. She's both in his gaze because he's more powerful. He kind of owns her story and directs her story a little bit. But it is, she's also trapped by the fact she's been given a story she doesn't want to tell.
Yeah.
And it's a story that's been told and retold, and she's a young writer, so what does she do with that? How does she overcome that?
I want to go back to that for a second because you sort of gently poke fun of your first novel.
Yes.
Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard, which is still it's still very charming, this novel. But you do make fun of it a little bit for this idea of, you know, it's a villager who goes up into a tree and ends up being taken quite seriously in new ways by his community. And you tease this idea that maybe it's just the slightest bit Orientalist.
Yes.
And I have to say, I laughed when I saw you do that. And Sonia also is studying...
You have to be able to laugh at yourself, right, as a writer?
Yeah. And it is a charming, funny book. But Sonia's also studying magical realism, and that's her thesis. And she's pulling from all of these different places. And I'm just watching these two ideas come together.
Yes. Well, you know, I was a very young author when I wrote Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard. And in my mind, I was writing a charming folk tale.
Right.
You know, close to the kind of folk tales I grew up with.
Right.
And it was influenced by those and by kind of rural landscape. And real life stories too, by the way, because
Yeah.
there actually was a hermit who climbed up a tree
Right.
and lived there. But also Calvino, I was also loved Baron in the Trees so
Right.
much, and I was definitely influenced by that. But as I said, I was a young author, and I hadn't learned yet that that writing it's freeing, but it's not exactly free. You are
Yeah.
being viewed as an author. Your work is going to be seen, and that view, that gaze upon your work, is not something you can ignore.
Right.
Because you can't, especially coming from you're coming from India. Your work is out in the international arena. It becomes important to think of how you are presenting your
Right.
landscape. And while it may not be Orientalist to an Indian, it is Orientalist outside India. So I began thinking like, oh, is it the audience that makes the story false? But at the same time, these are really important concerns.
Right.
How a country is written about, especially if it has been historically underrepresented.
But also watching Sunny, more Sunny than Sonia in some cases, wrestle with this idea of being away from home, and what does that identity mean, and how much of India is his still. And
Yes.
at one point he has a white girlfriend, and he's thinking, well, this isn't going particularly well, but I don't want to let go of her, and yet at the same time I also don't want to bring her into the rest of all of it, right? Like he's walking this knife edge.
He really is. And he recognizes his own selfishness. He doesn't want to share with her.
Right.
Because
right.
he thinks she's a privileged white person, and he doesn't want to give her any part of his landscape to make use of in any way. At the same time, he's a very privileged Indian, and he's aware that other people in India don't want to give him any of their story either. And they don't want him to run to the United States and make use of it and sell it overseas. So, I had long passages which I took out about kind of comic passages about him trying to get stories out of people, and everyone being so reluctant to tell him because they don't want him to sell their story. And that's happened to me too, by the way. I do go back to India, and it is a landscape that is of huge inspiration to me. And I remember talking to a taxi driver, and he had this extraordinary story. He'd gone to Iraq to work over there, I think as a cook.
Right.
And he had no idea there was a war going on.
Oh, wow.
And he
That's
ended up
something
in a
to
war
miss.
zone. And I said, can you tell me your story? And I would really love to hear it. And then he said no. And he said, no, madam, I would like to tell my own story. And can you help me get it published?
Yeah. Yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
There is that. But how do you miss that there's, and I mean, anything is possible, but how do you miss that there's a war? That seems like a big detail to miss.
Well, that's the way the news works, I guess. You sometimes have no clue what's going on in different parts of the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, that seems, even, we're walking around with supercomputers in our pockets. It's still like, can you find this on a map?
Yes.
I went back to Inheritance of Loss, which is your 2006 novel. You won the Booker Prize. Sunny and Sonia is currently, we are waiting to hear if perhaps you might get a second Booker, but we're going to sit quietly because that doesn't happen for a while. But I want to go back to Inheritance of Loss for a second, because there are bits of characters in there that do, to me, call back to Sunny and Sonia, which I guess I'm phrasing that backwards because obviously the book was written 20 years before Sunny and Sonia. But there's there's a math tutor, and then there's a young man who's here in the States working in kitchens throughout the city. And they both feel like parts of Sunny to me. Not like they're a test run for him, but just these ideas that you're churning about global. What does assimilation look like in a truly global economy?
Yeah.
Right? What does it mean to belong? What is I mean, you've sort of hit this before. There's a beauty in not belonging, right?
Yeah. I mean, for so many people, think just the thought that at this moment in time when we are being told constantly to hold on to a very strong national identity.
Right.
There's a rise of nationalism all over the world. That for so many people, like a flag is really useless. There are people who are moving across borders, and the entire experience of life is sort of undoing that sense of identity. Just, and so how ridiculous a flag is in some way for people like that. And what exactly are these borders that we are defining so strongly when we're being mixed up the way we are being mixed up?
Right. What does a border actually mean? But exile and love knock your characters off the beam, right? Like exile, they're both disorienting.
Yeah, I think there's some
almost in equal weight.
They're both. Did you say?
Both of them get knocked off the beam.
I think
they're
like
a little unbalanced.
Sonia's father who tells Sunny, he said, exile and love are what caused the poet Rumi's displacement, the Sufi mystic poet.
Yep.
That was the beginning of the spiritual quest. That sense of identity was undone by those two things. That's interesting to me.
It is interesting, and you give them a 6-year sort of window, right? Sunny and Sonia runs 96 to 2002-ish?
Yes.
Okay. 6-year window, they're in their 20s, they're actually functional adults.
Yes.
They are working to support themselves. Like, it is kind of a classic coming of age, but not precisely because it's a diaspora novel I've never read before. They don't just leave India and settle in one place and start. There is a character who he marries and ends up doing a medical program where he's in rural America and what have you. But Sunny and Sonia, I mean, there's Italy, there's Mexico, there's a lot of bouncing around.
Because, just what does it mean to be a young couple that's not a Western couple, a couple from the non-Western world going on vacation to Italy?
Right.
And I thought that may be very different from a Western couple going on vacation to Italy. So, yeah, and all those like subtle racial things, or not so subtle sometimes, both.
Oh, sometimes they are not subtle at all.
Sometimes they're not subtle at all.
Sometimes they are not
That was
subtle
certainly
at all.
my experience when I first left India and went to England. I said, oh, this is what they shout at you at a pub if you walk by closing time. That's what it means. But they're constantly watching and noticing, and in a way they're so alert. They have to be so alert. Right. But also, I mean, that's a parallel to, as you said, to Mexico. So what does it mean for someone from a non-Western part of the world go to another non-Western country?
Right. I loved those interludes. I want diaspora stories to get bigger. I want them to get bigger. I want them to feel less historical and more of the moment. And this book is so grounded in the present tense for me. I mean, yes, I'm saying 96 to 2002, but it's so grounded in the moment. And it's so grounded in, maybe it's a function of age. I don't know. It might be, but
yeah, probably the same age.
Yeah, well, I think.
But it's quite interesting to be this age, actually, to be what I am middle aged, and it's quite interesting to be a writer at this age now.
And to be able to look back though, and
to look back,
they're in a moment where cell phones are they're not mapping out their path. They literally get lost at one point because they can't just look up something on their phone.
Yes.
And that serendipity, there's a subplot that happens in Goa. There are a couple of different moments for different characters in Goa. And, Goa has been for so long presented as one of these like sort of hippie places.
Yes.
And that is not the experience we get in this Goa. And it feels like in a lot of ways to me as a reader that you're reclaiming terrain that may have been manhandled a little bit by colonialism, right? Like it's become a different landscape.
Yes. Goa had a hippie. There was definitely a hippie moment in Goa, with well, we can see all those photographs.
Right.
But it was always a conservative Catholic
Right.
state.
Right.
And, when you go into the villages in Goa, of course, it's an entirely different thing. And I think a lot of people were very offended and still are by tourists coming in and the way they behave on the beach.
Right.
And also it's transformed by India changing.
Yeah.
Indian tourism transforming the beaches of Goa. And I was also trying to talk about that moment in India, of it transforming as a nation. It's the beginning of that.
Right.
I think that started happening around this time period of mass Indian tourism, and also of more nationalism, being
Right.
in the air, and people speaking differently in living rooms and in private moments. So, yes, all those things. And Goa is also, of course, a Catholic state, and so I wanted to also write about minorities in India.
Yeah.
And minorities.
Yeah, well, minorities here too. I mean, the fluidity of this story, and I know I opened with, it's almost 700 pages. The chapters are remarkably short. The narrative tension, you sustain this narrative voice that is not easy to do, because I never once felt like I got stuck. I felt like the story was constantly flowing around me. I want to stick with this water metaphor that you use in the book for a second, because it just is so appropriate to the experience of reading the loneliness of Sunny and Sonia. You're completely immersed. I did not want to leave. I did not, and there were a couple of times where I really did actually have to sleep and put the book down, and I was like, well, that's inconvenient. But at one point, this manuscript was 5,000 pages.
Yes.
How, my friend? How in 20 years did you get to 5,000 pages? And how did you get it to this gorgeous, luminous, heartbreaking... there's a moment that you and I were talking about before we started to tape where I was like, I can't believe you did that to me. You did that something happens between and I was like, you did that to me. But you really, I mean, the earlier books are both under 300 pages, right? If I remember correctly, 200 and something each?
I can't remember exactly how long Inheritance was, but,
Still shorter than this.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think about other authors, like, I don't know how they write such long books over and over, as marveling at Hilary Mantel, for example.
Right? Place of Greater Safety. I love
Extraordinary.
her French Revolution novel. Yes, there are many people who love the Wolf Hall novels. I respect that. That's great. But really, her French Revolution novel.
Wow, I haven't read that.
It's not tiny, but it's really satisfying.
Or Dickens, for example. My goodness.
Right.
Wow. So, but 5,000 manuscript pages meant I was also doing reiterations. I mean, there were sometimes, there were just different ways of trying to get to the same emotion. But the way the book is structured in terms of, that those power divides.
Right.
And thinking, I have this little faceless, eyeless demon painting as a kind of deity of the book that allowed me to go all the way from the old forests of the Himalayas, when one of the characters says that Buddhism was older than the Buddha because it was so close to animism, and all the way to the museums of the present day. But once I realized that I could secretly construct the book according to this idea of who is captured by whose eyes, then there was no reason not to extend the book endlessly.
Right.
Sweeping out all the way to eternity.
Yeah.
I was thinking also there's a character who's the maid in the old house in the ancestral home who every morning comes to sweep. And she would put her sari over her head, and she's almost like a kind of mythical figure in the background. That's how I think of her, although it's a figure very common to my childhood. The
Right.
first thing in the morning, someone comes to sweep and should sweep the dust out of the house, down each step, and then out to the outskirts in kind of scallop pattern all the way out. And then the dust would fly back, and you'd have to do the same thing again.
Right.
So that was also how I was thinking of the book, of it just extending and extending. And
Right.
I could go back in time. I could have brought it up closer to the present. I could have extended it in terms of the cast of characters.
Right.
So eventually, I think my editors probably stepped in.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. We'll let them do their jobs. But the cast is exactly the right size. I mean, the family members are a delight, even when they're being slightly annoying. And I say that with love. But we have met those parents
Yes.
before, in a good way. And there's a moment, we see some friendships developing. We see this sort of change happen, but it's a very tight cast. It's a very, very small cast, which I appreciate. And I'm wondering if that was a conscious decision or if it just ended up showing up that way as you cut and reworked.
As I cut and reworked.
Yeah.
Because one of the stories that was very interesting to me was Sonia's grandfather,
Yeah.
who is German and comes to India, based very, very loosely on the story of my grandmother, who came from Berlin in the
Right.
1920s to India. And then, of course, the war broke out, and she stayed in India. She went back once, I think in 1928.
Oh, wow.
Something like that. And then
Yeah.
she never went back again. I think her mother came once sailing on the ship to India.
Oh.
And then she never saw her mother again or anyone else in her family. And completely that landscape was gone. And it's a mystery to me because I never knew her.
Right.
And all these silences, not deliberate, but nobody knows what happened at that time. And Indians were mostly going to Britain to study, but families that were very anti-British, like my mother's family was, they were
Right.
freedom fighters, they weren't sending their children to England, and they would send them to Germany to study instead. So there was a group of Indian students in Germany in the 1920s. So that was interesting to me because much of this book is about the rise of nationalism, and I wanted to go back into the past. But you
Right.
cannot, maybe I don't think you can write about 1920s, 1930s Germany.
Nope.
If it's not the center of the book.
Nope.
So,
Nope.
yeah.
Though for a second I was thinking of Isabella Hammad's novel The Parisian, where we've,
Yes.
it did make me think of that for a
Yes.
second. And
That's right, because then there's that crisis.
Right.
When what unfolds. And you think back
and then it sort of flips,
to
right?
what might have been in
Yeah.
your mind a happy moment, and then you realize, it was not as innocent as you imagined.
Abdul Razak Gurna, too. There was in Afterlives, there's something that happens, and I'm not going to spoil it, obviously, but Germany pops up in a way where you're just like, what just
Yes.
happened here? So this idea, too, that the world was so much of a bigger place because you physically had to take a boat.
Yes.
You couldn't fly. I mean, when I was a kid, flying to Tokyo from Boston was a 24-hour thing.
Yeah.
You simply could not go direct. And you had to sort of puddle jump your way until you got to the place that you were going. And now it's, you hop on a flight and you're done. And your eyes are the size of dinner plates when you walk off in a different time zone entirely. And it's nice to get a day back when you fly the opposite direction. But
Yeah.
again, watching Sonia and Sonny make their way in the world, class is still a thing, respectability is still a thing, your family is still a thing. It doesn't matter how many thousands of miles you are.
No, the class divide is bigger than ever.
Right? It's
The wealth divide is bigger than ever.
It's
Despite all these changes, yeah.
how do we How do we push forward? I mean, again, Sunny and Sonia feel very familiar to me in all of the right ways. Like, I just so relatable is I think what I'm looking for. They're wildly relatable to me. But how do we take what we learn from The Baron in the Trees or Kawabata's Snow Country or E.M. Forster, Where Angels Fear to Tread? Like, all of these books come circling through Sunny and Sonia. How do we do something differently? Like, how do we take all of this knowledge that we get from books and figure out how to make a better thing?
Well, you mean to make a better book or a better life?
Oh, both. Do we have?
those
I mean,
things.
do we have to separate them? Do we have to?
Well, I guess with Sunny and Sonia, they are not separate, right? I
Right.
mean, because their reading becomes deeply part
Right,
of their
right.
existence, and I think books are like that. I mean, there's something spooky that happens. You know, those books, certain books find you,
Right.
or you find them, and then your life is transformed in some way.
Right.
And I was reading, who knows why these books came my way when they did, but during the course of writing, I was reading the books that I mentioned. I was reading Kafka's
Yeah.
The Castle, and there's that scene, the beginning is so unbelievably beautiful. There's a traveler at the base on a bridge, and he's looking up at the mountain, and it's a swirl of snow, and is it dim light, and he knows there's a castle there, but he can't see it. And such a metaphor for writing a novel, by the way. I think it's just, there you are looking, there's something there, but you can't see it for decades. But so I was reading Kafka, which is a book that Sonia's mother's reading on a honeymoon. And I think Elan says to Sonia, that was a book that foresaw what happened in Germany.
Right.
Because it's just a book about estrangement, of not understanding why you don't belong, wanting to belong, trying to belong, and being told you may only belong after you're dead, perhaps,
Right.
And I was reading E.M. Forster. Was so interesting to me because, of course, he wrote Room with a View, and he wrote Where Angels Fear to Tread about Italy.
Yep.
And then he also wrote Passage to India. So
Can we spend some time with Passage to India for a second? Because I go back and forth on this book.
it's a long time since I read
Right?
Passage to India.
Yeah.
I read it when I was a child, really, and saw the film when I was a child.
Yeah. He spent time in India. Like, he lived in India, but he is part of that whole colonial British
Yes.
Raj kind of historical moment where you're like, yeah, that's its own bubble.
Yes, and of course he was accused for that. I
Right.
mean, accused about that.
Right.
And there were people who kept playing Orwell, Forster, were all sort of, I think Passage to... But I have to say, I think it is a remarkable book. He was a remarkable writer. Orwell too. I mean, if you read a book called Burmese Days, you
Which I
cringe.
love.
But you
Yeah.
cringe because it's so, the racism is so enormous. It's really hard to read in some ways, but it's such a fantastic book because, of course, it exposes the rot
Right.
of the whole of that image, that grand imperial image.
I haven't read Burmese Days in a long time, but I remember that's, because you're handed 1984 and Animal Farm when you're young because they're short.
Yes.
And theoretically easy to teach, right?
Yes. So funny. They're short, that's right.
Right, and then you sort of end up missing a little bit of the plot, right? And like you end up missing a little when you're 13, But I was handed Burmese Days much later in college, and that's when I connected with Orwell. I felt like he was writing to a very modern frame of mind, when in fact, Burmese Days was written in like 1918 or something. Like, it was wildly historical at that point, and yet at the same time, just the way the dialogue yes, the vocabulary was the vocabulary, but just the swing of the dialogue and just the way everything moved and the way he just would not let go of what was sitting right in front of him. I was like, oh this is not an old man writer. It's kind of like when you discover Hemingway at the right moment and you're like, oh, this is not some old guy kicking a can down the street. What is happening here?
And I had read Hemingway as a child, but then I was rereading Hemingway.
Yeah.
I don't know, it stunned me. I thought, ran around telling everybody, oh, this is why he's so famous, because he's so good. It turns out.
Right.
But it's also disturbing in some deep way too, which is something that Sunny thinks about. I mean, this idea of American journalism out in the world, and you wonder, Sunny wonders, are Americans going to war just because to keep alive an idea of the United States? And what does that huge, big, overblown image of the United States actually do to the country and to its people? So, but yeah, I mean, Miwa, I went to Myanmar with my father, actually, when he was still alive.
Oh, seriously?
So a long while,
when?
decades and decades. It was Aung San Suu Kyi was in prison.
Okay, all right.
But one of the few books you could buy everywhere was, bizarrely, Burmese Days.
Okay.
It was everywhere.
I would not have
You would not
expected.
have expected that, no?
No, I would not have expected that in the least.
So strange. But yeah, just all those books that are in this book were books that I was reading while I was writing mine, and somehow seemed to have something to say to my characters and to my plot.
Anna Karenina,
Yes.
the brothers Karamazov. Oh, I went noodling around in some things.
Snow Country.
Snow Country, which is still insanely beautiful.
It is.
But also painful and painful in a good way, if that doesn't sound too weird. There's also a Tanizaki that you reference, which is a nonfiction book actually about art and shadow and architecture, and it's not. There's so much about creation.
Yeah.
And what it means to live a life so you can create. And you've got Sunny doing his thing and Sonia doing her thing and Alan being Alan. But in some ways, they are all leading lives of community, communion, creation. I mean, it's kind of fascinating to watch them figure out what the path really is. Yeah.
Yeah, Tanizaki writing about shadows, that was what was so interesting to me, because and also writing about the importance of the past, keeping the past close and using shadows to keep the past close, and writing against bright lights, and thinking about how shadows create a theatrical life, create the mystery that's necessary for creation, for a creative life. And much of this book takes place in a kind of shadow world.
Yeah. You
a nightmarish world sometimes, of nightmarish creatures, but kind of the shadow world, I think, is as important to this book as the ordinary light of day.
It needs both. Yeah, I mean, it needs both. But I want to talk about that painting for a second that you were talking about, the sightless painting. There are elements of this book that you have borrowed from your own life.
Yes.
I mean, it's not a lot, but there are things I recognize. But I want to talk about this painting for a second, because it turns out it actually exists.
Yes.
And I am totally fascinated by this painting. I love the very idea of this painting. I love what this painting represents in the story and how it pulls together a bunch of different threads. But how did you get your hands on this
amazing
sightless painting? Yeah.
Talisman?
Yeah.
I was writing an introduction to an art exhibition by the painter Francesco Clemente,
right,
who is an Italian painter who grew up in Naples and went to India, I think in the 1970s, and pursued theosophy, which is this was something in the air even when I was growing up, but definitely during the time of my parents.
Okay.
And theosophy is a sort of mystical philosophy that believes that in this shadow world, all that we are actually connected in a shadow world of it, that all races people, countries, nations are actually linked and equal. Believes in the equality.
Right.
And Francesco Clementi's work is very rooted in India and is very mystical and very spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of it is in the medium of watercolor, and it's about transformation. And I was thinking a lot about how the sense of identity that's imposed on us, or we're supposed to want, or we keep pursuing. We keep saying, I need to find my identity, I need to stand up for my identity, national identity, personal identity, racial identity, how we actually are often trying to escape this imposed identity.
Right.
And we seek out
Mm-hmm.
ways to escape in religion, in art, in dream,
Mm-hmm.
in love, all these different things. And I think that's what the work of Clementi means to me. And I love those images that are sort of half transforming into other creatures. Or there's a lot of dream worlds where, it's like an afternoon siesta where you're not really sleeping, but all these images are sort of linking in your mind. It seems to capture that moment to me, those different forms and colors that are playing on the back of your eyelids. It's very much like that. That's the mood of his work, or this exhibition anyway.
One of the things I really appreciate about the loneliness of Sonny and Sonia is that surprise. I wasn't expecting that sort of thrumming underneath of the mystical, the spiritual, the slightly...
Me neither.
And I love the idea of darkness as a conceit, especially when it comes to creative pursuits, right? Like, you have to spend time with the icky side of your brain in order to make the thing.
Yes, and also we see it in the world. I mean, we are seeing that it is actually kind of wickedly closely plotted as well. You see these dark undercurrents that link our world too. So you have to think about those.
And we still manage to be surprised by them.
Yes.
I don't know.
But I was surprised it came up in this book, because I was expecting to write a purely realistic book without these more mystical ideas and the more esoteric elements. And also perhaps because I had been thinking about Orientalism, magic realism, and I'd sort of turned against those ideas because I was somewhat persuaded by the arguments against them. And in Inheritance of Loss, I did not have those elements. Somehow in this book I combined them because I didn't think that I could leave them out. It was a kind of a brave decision because I thought I would be actually criticized for this. But I didn't think that it was accurate to leave out those nightmares that Sonia experiences, and the fact that her fear is a hallucinatory fear, and the fact that our world is actually not realistic. That the journeys people make are not realistic. They're like epics that are just, you cannot imagine they're actually happening. Who gets sent to Alligator Alcatraz?
Right.
How do you write about that?
Well, and who gets to tell the story, and who gets to hold the record, as it were, right? Like, who gets to say, this is the thing, this is the version, this is 1.0, this is 2.0, this is 3.0.
Yes.
Who is actually recording the thing and how?
Yes.
And part of why I'm so attached to both Sonny and Sonia too is that given how they were both raised, they could have been very, very different people, and they didn't always make great choices, but they did also have good choices available to them because of their background. So it's that funny catch-22 where you're like, well, I don't want this, and I don't want to be part of this, and I don't want to be like these people.
Yes.
But if it weren't for these people, I wouldn't be able to go off and do this other thing.
Yes, it's true. And they both actually come from privileged backgrounds.
Right.
And they have certain choices open to them. And, thinking about this, thing about this idea of identity,
Mm-hmm.
they are privileged enough that it's not imposed upon them so strongly that there is an escape.
Yeah.
They don't belong to communities where it is so strongly imposed that there's no other choice.
What's the difference between escape and exile, though? Because sometimes I think exile isn't necessarily a bad thing,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes you just need to shift,
Well, it gives you a time of, it's a kind of time of self
right?
reinvention,
Yeah.
right? I mean, loneliness or solitude is a time of, it's a sort of, can be a necessary loneliness if you're moving into some other idea of yourself. There's actually a beautiful essay by Borges called The Nothingness of Personality.
Yeah.
You read that? Where he comes, it's a moment of fright, where he suddenly sees a friend and he suddenly thinks, well, I'm actually made of nothing at all.
Right. I been thinking about this a little bit because you 20 years, this book, 20 years in the making, lots of time at your desk by yourself, but you also, I want to bring your mom into this conversation for a second, because your mother is the novelist Anita Desai. She is a 3-time Booker nominee. Nominee, okay. She should have won. And I've been reading her for more than a minute.
Yeah.
But you also have not just the mother-daughter relationship, but you have a working relationship with your mother as well. And I'm wondering if we could spend a couple minutes with that, just talking about, because, I mean, obviously you can separate, you're both working writers, you both have very distinct points of view. But we don't always necessarily think of writing as a collaborative act outside of, there's screenwriting, but writing novels tends to be a very solitary pursuit. So I'm wondering how your mom comes into this as on the creative side, on the process side.
Well, we've often worked in the same house.
Okay.
Over the years that we spent spans of time together. I visit her all the time. And, we've been in India working together.
Yeah.
We've been in Mexico working together. We used to go every winter to Mexico.
Okay.
We went to Goa once together, and we were working on a veranda together. So part of it is, just, I learned the discipline of a writing life from her because she has it very strongly.
Right.
It's built up over decades now, and she was writing when she had 4 little children at home.
I was about to, you have other siblings. I know there are other siblings.
And I'm the youngest
Right. Okay.
by some 6 years. So she really had to carve out that writing space. And kind of remarkable to have done that in India at that time, to find the books that she needed,
Right.
read them, put them on her bookshelf. I think the writing opened a door to the bigger world, and one day she stepped through. It was really her books being published that allowed her to eventually leave India, teach abroad, and I came with her. But in terms of the process, she's a very different writer because she also the discipline, but she also doesn't use a computer. So, she thinks things through
Right.
before she puts them on paper. She can't constantly cut and paste and move
Right.
them around. However, we are also writing from similar landscapes. So I will read something that she's written, and I will say, oh, it's the same. I recognize it. It's the
Right.
same graveyard on the same Mexican coast that's actually in her Rosarita and in my Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny.
I was wondering about that, so I'm glad thank you for confirming that for me, because I was like,
it's so strange.
hi.
It's
But
so strange.
the minute you said, you were both in Mexico, right? I was like, okay, it's not just me.
No,
I'm
and
not
there's
conflating something
that
here.
veranda in Allahabad,
Yep.
it's portrayed very differently, but she also has that veranda in Fasting Feasting.
Yeah.
So when she reads my work, and she's always the first person who reads it, I mean, she knows the land, she knows what I'm trying to do because she just knows where, she knows those landscapes before I've been able to actually perhaps put them across properly.
I love that. I love the
Yeah.
idea of you and your mom working together. It just delights me to know, and that two novelists I love have sort of simpatico working. I don't know what I want to call it.
Yeah.
It's 3:56. I knew. You see, I knew. Yeah. I knew time was going to fly, but we have covered everything we wanted to do
Yes.
in this conversation, because part of the joy of the loneliness of Sunny and Sonia, and I know you and I have literally had a global conversation about a global novel. More importantly, is the experience of reading it and the sheer joy and just everything about this book is perfect. So this is where I get to say, Kiran Desai,
Thank you so much.
thank you so much for joining us on Poured
Thank
Over.
you.
This was fun. This was
Wonderful. It was wonderful.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.